We've just been joined by Jenn Hodge. Welcome, Jenn.
And
So
Jen's speaking next week as well.
yes, Jenn will be at the protest next week. And so what we've been doing, have you met Fiona, Jenn? Meet Fiona.
Only
Um,
virtually.
I don't have we met Fiona? I don't think we have.
No, only like
Virtually.
virtual things.
yeah,
Yeah.
Mm.
yeah. So so we've been running through the new amendments, which is mainly really it's actually part of what we meant. So we set up this live a few weeks ago. We planned it, but we didn't know these nasty amendments were coming in. Um, and so we will move the conversation on a little bit from the amendments to some of the other points that we wanted to discuss. So where's it gone now? I've got to go and find where my notes are. Sorry. Too many tabs open, as we said. Oh, there we go. Got it. Okay. So, um, have you had a chance to look at the amendments, Jenn? Just you don't
I
need to get into detail. Just
yeah,
asking if you had
just
a
yeah,
chance to look at them.
I kind of know the headlines,
Mm.
and I've kind of looked at some of the key ones, and I haven't sifted through all of them because there's obviously a ferocious number.
Yeah.
But yes, I'm certainly
You
aware of
found the nasty ones.
the key headlines, the key bits that have snuck their way in, which is just charming.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Not what we wanted to see. So I'm just setting it up so I can see the chat over there.
Yes, and I know Fiona might be leaving us at some point, but thank you so much, Fiona, for participating today. It's always a treat to have your very measured approach, even if it is jaded. Um, and thank you so much for your insights today. We really appreciate that. But you feel free to stick around as well if you don't have anywhere else to be. So Jenn, I wanted to move on a little bit to kind of think. So we've got the bill, we've got these amendments. Um, we're at the moment haven't been able to stop the wrecking ball that is this bill. So we're having to consider what is the future going to look like for home educators. The landscape is going to change significantly. Um, so that's going to impact people like you, where you work a lot also in supporting home educators and giving advice and that kind of thing, like Michelle and I do as well. Um, we need to think a little bit, don't we? How are we going to cope with this? Um, what are some positive things that we could maybe do? Have you got any thoughts on that? I mean, you can branch out if you feel that's too narrow, because
Oh,
I mean, the first thing we could perhaps do is look at, if we talk about this, the theme of this today is changing landscapes. How has the landscape changed within the home educating community from say 10, 15 years ago or more to what we're seeing today within the community itself? How's that shifted?
Well, I think it's been seismic, really. I think if you compared home education 10, 15 years ago to that of, 30 years ago, it probably would have looked fairly similar. I think that for a long time it was people who philosophically wanted to opt out of the system. There were some families who had young people whose needs weren't met in schools, but the setup in mainstream was, I say, more flexible in decades gone by. It's become more and more rigid. It's been harder to get needs met. There would have been perhaps a lot more people using flexi schooling or using a unofficial arrangement where their child was kind of in school but kind of not in school all the time, but nobody really cared too much because they were getting what they needed, and the school perhaps knew that they couldn't meet needs. But that's obviously changed as we've become the government society's become so much more rigid, so much more we have to know where everybody is and exactly what they're doing, and they have to do this thing because we have to use control to make sure everybody's happy, healthy, and getting an education. But unfortunately, that doesn't work. And so what we're seeing now is the result of that. So with the restriction of, the national curriculum getting more restricted, the lack of investment into the arts, and kind of hands-on and engineering and all these kind of things, and the kind of e-bike subjects becoming God in all things in school, we're then seeing this huge number of young people who are now coming out of school, as schools get stricter with uniforms, with behaviour, with you're not allowed to touch each other, you're not allowed to talk to each other in the corridors, you've got to go in one way. Isolation rooms becoming this common thing. I remember there being one room in school where if people were messing around, they'd have to go in there and mess around in there instead. But this idea of putting kids in little isolation booths and giving them a pre-packed sandwich and a bottle of water and telling them to get on with it that's all quite modern and quite recent. And so the home education landscape has changed massively. We've now got an influx with loads of people who never thought they'd home educate, didn't think it would be something they would want to do. With that has been lots of positives because we've had lots of people say, oh, I wish I'd always done this. I wish I'd known about this before. This is incredible. I wish I'd been home educated. And because of the influx, what it's also meant is there's a lot more provision available. So whereas when my kids were, my eldest two, who are now kind of pretty much adults, when they were little, you would be lucky to find a home ed group in your nearest town. You might have to travel. There might be the occasional event or activity, but you had to kind of look around for them. But because of this huge influx, what we've seen is now everyone is running home ed sports, home ed gym, home ed languages, home ed forest schools. So for the home ed community as a whole, whilst some parent-run grassroots groups will have felt a little bit maybe a tidal wave of new people coming in and that being quite strange, and perhaps young people who have been to school more recently, and that might have changed the dynamics of their group. What they've also got is now access to a lot more provision for their young people. So I believe, I don't like using clouds and silver linings, but I definitely believe that for everything that happens in the world, there will always be benefits to be found. There will always be positives. So that's kind of how I think the home ed landscape has changed. There's a lot more use of digital, I think, because of COVID. Since then, a huge increase in online tutors, access to educational provision. And I think everybody's just become a lot more open-minded about it. And I must say that I've really thought that's a real positive of what's kind of changed in the landscape. 15 years ago, you're there having to explain to every shopkeeper why your children isn't in school, yes, it's allowed, yes, it's legal. No, we don't have to follow the national curriculum. No, they don't have to take GCSEs if they don't want to, la 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 la. Yes, they do have friends. But now everybody knows. I don't think anybody questions it anymore because it's fairly obvious why your children aren't in school. It's because they're being home educated. And in fact, even when people do ask, it's like, oh yes, my neighbour does that, my aunt does that, my cousin does that. So actually, weirdly, in an attempt to make things more rigid, more school-based, more narrow, the opposite has happened, that actually in the general public, society has woken up and gone, oh, goodness, does school work? Does school meet needs? Actually, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it isn't the only way. So I kind of, whilst I'm not enjoying the process that we are going through at the moment, legally, I am really thankful that everybody's opening their eyes and realizing that education can be done in a different way.
Sorry, I was just muted and I was trying to get my cursor back where I needed to.
No,
So
that's fine.
thanks for Jen. And I think some of this is informing the bill. Some of this sort of increase that we're seeing is what's driving changes to the law. And I think because we're seeing so many from SEND backgrounds, they're supposedly meant to be reforming SEND provision, or they're not.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and that's sorry, that's yeah, I mean,
Why are you laughing? I don't
oh,
get it.
I don't know. Why on earth would I be laughing that their solution to reforming SEND is to put them all back in mainstream school and give them a fidget toy and half an hour's of training for the teacher and everything's going to be great. It's laughable. It's a joke. And I think what's I don't know. Maybe my some of my kids get annoyed with me because I'm so blooming optimistic and positive, but I believe in I believe there's a lot of things that you can mess around with people. You can put their car tax up, you can introduce a emissions charge, you can put the council tax up, you can mess around with doctor's appointments. But when you start to mess around with people's children, it's a totally different ballpark. And I think that the current government has got, in fact, probably most MPs have got very narrow vision when it comes on very narrow understanding when it comes to the instinct of a parent when you start to threaten their child. And that is really what we need to play on. That's what we need to be calling on now, is for parents to really understand what is being threatened, and to not accept it. Yes, this bill, I don't know what's going to happen. It's likely to pass. Yes, it could not. It could ping pong about until a general election is called. Something could change. There could be a massive, and anything could happen. We can't predict exactly what's going to happen. But let's say it goes through. We've then got consultation stages. We've got it takes time to do it all, and there's these lofty views of certain MPs and lords now we're seeing of the believing that perhaps the local authority has just got well this huge vast amounts of time and money to implement all these wonderful glorious amendments and changes and things they want put in place. And the truth is that the local authorities are on their knees. I work with the children that send, so with the local authority, the kind of send children education, looked after children, all the kind of areas that involve children and education at my local authority. And it's a joke. Wonderful, the people that are doing a wonderful job, yes, that's great, but the vast majority of them are on sick leave or have gone to work somewhere else, because they have no money, they have no support, they cannot do the minimal that you think they should be doing for children. They are not able to do because they're not resourced to do it. It's not the individual. Yes, there are some people that maybe shouldn't be in their jobs, but there's a lot of good people that aren't supported. So to think that the LAs are suddenly going to be able to implement all these changes. So it's not just stopping the bill, and it's not just when the bill comes out what we're going to do about it. I just don't think it's going to be anywhere near as simple as anybody thinks. We're talking so many opportunities for things to go wrong, so many opportunities that they're going to go, oh, yeah, we did say we wanted to do all that, but actually we can't do that quite now. So we're just going to do this thing. We have seen governments, our government, over the years, invest millions in new policies and then they get overturned. It gets implemented, they do a thing, they realise it's a total mess, and it gets thrown out, it gets changed, and another government comes
from
in.
your lips to God's ears, Jen.
Yes, absolutely. I'm saying it, speaking it out there.
Yeah, the thing is also like where I live, most of the schools are full. And specific like certain year groups, there's like no chance you can get a place. So if they had to try and put more children back into school, you're going to be putting children into like a really crowded classrooms. It's not going to be it's not going to offer them anything that's superior.
It's just simply not going to work. And the joke is that Bridget Phillipson obviously did a little battle against private education, and then lots of private schools have shut down and lots of parents and have had to make different choices. And then Bridget turns around and goes, well, we haven't seen an increase in school placement, so surely it's not a problem. And you're like, no, you stupid woman, it's because they're all being home educated. So not only is there going to be this influx of home educated children that perhaps are going to get swept up with the bill and they're going to attempt to force them back into school, good luck, but they're also going to be all of these ex-privately educated young people. And not only that, but a hell of a lot of really, excuse my French, pissed off parents. Parents that have sacrificed income, the second car, holidays, the food shopping having to be reduced, whatever they've sacrificed in order to home educate, if they think that they're going to take kids back into school just because they've waved a school attendance order in front of them and they're going to go quietly, you're going to think again, because these people have already sacrificed, they've already given up promotions, pay rises, all these things because they've had to make changes or support a young child with SEN needs that haven't been met. To think that everyone's going to roll over and go, okay, well, we're going to send little Jimmy into school. Even those who do send their child in, I mean, what kind of parents are going to be coming? What's the interaction with school and parents? I mean, I don't know. I can't imagine me as a school parent. I mean, who would want, what school is going to want my kids? I mean, I would be an absolute thorn in, I'd live on the gates. I'd make their life absolutely impossible. And it's not just about the individual. It's not just about cherry picking. It's we're not going to go away as a community. So even if this bill goes through, we're only going to strengthen, we're only going to redouble our efforts, and we will be here encouraging the nation of parents who are being impacted this bill to not just lie down and take it, to stand up, to speak, to have their voice, to advocate for their child. So I don't think that a lot of what they want to do is going to be easy to implement. And even if they do start to do that, we mobilize, we carry on mobilizing, and we stand up. And it to be honest, in a way, and Michelle may agree with this, you kind of need something to be law to fight against it. You need something to be actually, at the moment, it's hard. It's kind of hard battling a kind of a ghost of a thing where you're going, oh, well, this could happen.
Well, it's still changeable. It's still changeable. They can still amend it.
Yeah, it's malleable. It's whatever. They're going, oh, it's going to be fine. We're going, no, it isn't. Once it is there and once it isn't okay, it is so much easier to then do something, and it actually more people will be mobilized. So at the moment we might be going, oh, but this is going to impact loads of people, loads of home educators aren't engaging with it. Okay, they're not, but they will do when it's on their doorstep. And at that point we will have, there's probably nearly 200,000 home educated young people. We will then have a huge amount of people going, just a minute. And yes, for us, that's going to be frustrating. We're going to go, where were you? Where were you when we were on the stage and waving our banners and whatever?
Yeah.
But that's fine. But we will be there then, and we will have the leadership will be in place. There will be people there.
Actually, we might be looking for those people to take over the challenge, because we'll
we'll all be a bit tired.
A long-term holiday.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what is currently working in terms of like local authorities and home educating families and those relationships? What is working at the moment?
I think some individual LAs are doing some individual good things. We see the odd report of this council have a great HE team and they're being really positive and they're trying to signpost, or they're sending out a nice sheet of paper with a list of local groups, or they're putting people in touch with people. Some individuals understand, there's actually quite a lot, I think, in certainly with the dealings that I've had with my local LA, there's a lot of understanding that mainstream doesn't meet enough needs, and there's a lot of understanding that about those in-between children who don't fit in one, who don't fit in the other. There's a lot of support for alternative provision. I think on the ground, like always, it's the people doing the actual job that probably know what is needed, and it's higher up in the councils and in the government that haven't got a Scooby-Doo what we need. So certainly there's individuals doing a good job. There's some councils that are fairly light touch. There are some councillors in councils who are quite positive and proactive, but everybody's just lacking resources and funding. I mean, I don't imagine there is an LA that's like a shining example of what you would want for home education, because what you would want is just a fantastic service where you get someone who's going to give you that real get to know you and your family and your child, but in a totally non-threatening, we're not going to change anything, we're just here to help you. If I think about the level of advocacy, support, kind of education that I give to families every day, without charging for it, as in it's an unpaid part of my job. And I think, these families would that would be amazing if they had access to a service like that was actually just part of the local authority. Let's talk about your child. Oh, what needs, how could we support you at home? How could this might help? Parenting support, learning support, educate, oh, you're thinking of doing this, right? Have you considered this? So I don't think I think home educators have long just become, I think we are the nation of people who are just grateful if they get a pair of socks. It's that feeling of being grateful for getting a pair of socks at Christmas. We're just grateful if the LA just leave us alone or they just send us a polite letter that gives us options, and it's really exciting. It's like Santa has come if we get a list of local groups. So our bar is set quite low for home
Yeah.
educators. So there's a lot that could be done. And in the bill, there's this wonderful part that kind of says, we're going to support home educators, but it doesn't actually outline any support. So
Yeah,
it's
doesn't.
it's not actually giving any support. Local authorities must support them. It's like, great, they're supposed to do that now. What does that mean? You've invested a lot of time and money into writing all these specific clauses about how you're going to control home education. You're not written anything specific about how you're going to help it.
Or control your local authorities from behaving
Indeed.
badly. So
Indeed.
there is that. So, what was I going to say? So, like you guys know, I've mentioned, like in our local authority, we have a very respectful, mutually respectful relationship with our local authority. There's no sort of overreach. They do act if they feel there's cause to act, but generally they will leave people alone that are getting on with it, and don't place any undue burden on them. And I think there's something to be said for maybe looking at these good examples, and presenting them to politicians. Say, well, this is actually working. I know some of my councillors that I've spoken to are extremely positive about home education, about children, and when I've mentioned about some of how local authorities behave, they're like absolutely shocked, because we need to be supporting you, we need to be encouraging you, they've got, and that's such a positive thing. And it's really sad when you don't have that, because that should be like a bare minimum as a local authority, is that you are supporting sort of these initiatives and community, and something that is legal. It's not only legal practice. So it's, I think it's just a bit insulting to us, really. And it's when many families have been so burnt by the system, and then to have them turn around and say, well, actually we think they're better off in that system that damaged them.
I think
And
this is
crazy.
something that I wrote about recently, and it's about the double standards as well. The double standards we have in education, that if your child, as long as their name is on a mainstream school register and they're rocking up every day, the bar is set so ridiculously low that it's okay if they're bullied, it's okay if they're miserable, it's okay if they don't want to go there, it's okay if they're crying on the gate and they're having to be prized off their parents. It's okay if they don't really enjoy it, if they're not really that engaged. It's okay if they kind of bubble along under the surface, as long as they're not too ridiculously low that they're going to impact the school's kind of statistics.
And just make them stay home when Ofsted
It's
comes.
just, at home education, your child, you have to prove that you're like getting gold standard education across the board, gold standard everything, and that's nuts, because actually we can't even pretend that that's what gets offered in mainstream now. And certainly when it comes to neurodivergent young people, of which I think the home education community has always had a very high percentage of. It's just people weren't diagnosed because it tended to be the neurodivergent parents that thought outside the box and went, oh, school didn't work for me. I don't think it does what it needs to do. I'm not going to educate my children that way. And so there's always been this high number of young people in that way. And in fact, they're the young people that are massively underserved in mainstream school. So to kind of, when you kind of said earlier about, parents should be like outraged or whatever, this is going to be a big message that I'm going to be trying to get across to people. We do need to be outraged. We need to be kind of going, what on earth do you think you're doing? Because the offering for our children in mainstream is just not good enough.
No,
It's
no.
not acceptable. It's not acceptable for a child to be distressed in school. It's not
Yes, but you can
acceptable.
get breakfast for free.
Yes, you can get, yeah, and your school uniform's only going to cost you 200 quid instead of 400. It's absolutely insanity where we're going now, which is why we need people to open their eyes to it and engage, even if they're not home educating, just to engage and go, what are we doing? And certainly with
Yeah.
some of the amendments that are coming out, these kind of ideals of trialing the idea that, you need to go and sit on part of a panel before you're even allowed to deregister. I mean, even if parents don't want to home educate, at the back of their head, sure, a lot of them are aware that it's their legal right to do what they want with their child within, as long as they're
Well,
taking care
yeah,
of
I
the
mean,
child.
well, we have the school fines campaign where parents are saying, look, it's my child. I want to
Yeah,
spend quality time with them. I want to take a holiday because, my mother's aging my mother's in this country, another country, and she's aging. I want my child to see her while he still
yeah.
can. And, it's just like, there's nothing, it's very anti-family, I sort of feel. Very
It's
anti
that,
about
yeah.
family spending time together.
It's anti-family, it's and you know what, it's anti-health, it's anti-well-being, it's it's even anti-education. It's the tightening of the vice around our children, tightening the grip of the vice and expecting to have good outcomes, and we're already seeing that that's not working. And to think that the government are investing so much into trying to force children back into a broken system and they're doing nothing to change that system. I there was a time in my life that, okay, I've never been keen on politicians, but there was probably times in my life where I thought, well, they must know something to be there doing that job. But my respect, I very much view myself as having a far higher understanding of the educational well-being and health needs of children than the vast majority of people that actually are being paid at government to make decisions about this stuff, because they it and it's not just me. Like, okay, I do that as a living, but almost every parent I meet, I think, probably has a far better understanding than what is actually happening at policy level, because it's not about, it can't be about education anymore. It's not about education, it's not about well-being, it's not about health, it's simply about control. And I know that sounds awfully dramatic and very political, but that's the only thing it can be about, because you cannot really believe that a child is able to learn in the best possible way if they are not happy and healthy, if they're not safe in their environment, if they're not comfortable and relaxed. It's just common sense. So I think, and the absolute reluctance of Bridget Phillipson and her team to admit that there is potentially anything wrong with the school system as it is, it's just pure insanity. It's trying to argue that black is white. I mean, it just show it. I have so little time now, like, even if you said, oh, do you want to be in a room and have a chat with Bridget Phillipson? I don't even think I would, because what would be the point? Because for her to have the policy she has to have so little actual understanding. I don't think she would understand me. I mean,
Yeah.
clearly it,
Yeah.
it's, we know that there is more about it. There is more to it than
Yeah.
what is on the surface, and it's important that we stay focused on what we know is important, which is our children.
I think it's a bit like walking around with a broken leg and trying to ignore that, pretending your leg's not broken.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I'm fine. No, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Fine. Um, yeah, it's that I find really difficult, and it's a very difficult time to be a politician who's not in the Labour Party right now, because the Labour Party have such a majority. The Labour government, as long as they stand firm and stand together, which they do, they're working very hard to do, they can pass anything and they can get rid of anything. So the amendments that our well-meaning lords and MPs have tried to add, where they've tried to speak out, tried to do something, that means nothing. And it's not just this bill, it's with many other bills. There are some very, very unhappy politicians out there who are trying very hard to be politicking, and they can't. They can't do what they feel that many of them have become politicians for noble reasons, wanting to improve things, wanting to help their communities. And all they can do is actually work within their local community, because on a national level, they cannot bring the change unless they're a Labour minister.
I really, if you look at how much our world has changed in the last couple 100 years, 50 years, 20 years, 10 years, I believe that things will change on the political landscape, that there will be reform. We can only carry on walking down hallways carrying golden scepters and doffing our caps and ringing the bells, and we can only carry on with this kind of parliamentary behaviour for so long before people, we're already really, it's growing thin. The pomp and circumstance is growing thin. The old boys club is growing thin, and as there has been so much change in other areas, it will come. Now, the problem is it might not be in my lifetime. Okay, it might not happen instantly. I might not get to see the reform that we need to see in our government. I would love it if we did, and I hope we do, but this is when we start scratching the surface of home education and school and send, you go down the layers and you go, but the problem is the whole thing is a mess. The whole thing doesn't work. The whole political system, the whole governance system, it is all such a complete waste of money and time, because people turn up for 4 years and they do this, and then next people come and they undo it all, and then we redo it. And people are allowed to be ministers for departments they have no skills, expertise, and knowledge in. You've seen what's happened in the judicial department before, with things that have been cocked up with the probation service and the prison service. Massive things have been messed up by uneducated people stepping into ministerial roles and making silly decisions to push themselves higher up. That is the problem. When you have these conversations too deep, you end up at the bottom line all the time is, we need governmental reform. We need to change the way we do things. And that's another thing we can be working towards. However, it's kind of rolling that back and going, we are where we are. And the key thing is that we actually ride the wave that has been created. The government has created a problem within mainstream schools, or exacerbated an existing problem. That's created this big tidal wave of home educators. That's created this bill with everybody going, oh, well, we've got to control this mass of home educators. But we are on this big wave where we have all these people that have opted for home ed, all these people who are that the government has inadvertently created connection and community across the private sector, across the school sector with school fines, across the home education sector. We are, as parents, we are more connected than ever before. The divides, the walls have come down. We are now parents standing shoulder to shoulder. And this is what we have to ride now. This is the momentum and the wave that we need to jump on and say, we keep pushing back. No, we're not accepting that. We're not accepting that. We're not handing over our primacy to you. You work for us. This is our children. We need to do better. And I believe if we focus on that whilst, yes, there's loads of stuff that needs doing below the surface, there will be enough momentum. Things will change, because we're already seeing it. And that's
I
what we
mean,
need.
I don't have an issue with the little bits of tradition and so on. I think those are very quaint, and it makes people want to come and be tourists and spend money in our country, which is great. But what I do have a problem with is, as you've said, those who don't know very little about the portfolios they're given, not listening, not speaking to the the actual experts, um, trusting in their own hodgepodge of knowledge of their own childhood experiences, or I mean, that works to our advantage where we've had MPs and lords are connected to home educating families. Of course, they're drawing on that experience, but at least they're speaking to actual people that are affected. And I agree that we do need reform, but what we need is also for us to be more engaged. So we've had a real difficulty with this campaign against the bill, of real division within our home educating community, where certain people, they do not see the big picture. They do not see what we all stand to lose. They're more concerned with what, but I don't want to agree with, I don't want to stand next to them protest because they believe something different to me. And I don't want to, and I don't like what that person's saying. So, but they do not realize that we basically going, we have to stand together over the things that we are opposed to, just like in a war. In World War
Yeah,
II, when Britain
yeah,
had
yeah.
to align itself with countries it wouldn't normally, because that was how they could actually see the big picture and win the bigger war, rather than worrying about the little squabbles and battles. And you're always going to you're never going to 100% agree with everybody. I know you all agree with me, but
Oh, of course.
but everyone else, we know you won't agree with. But um, we're not going to. But the big picture is that every single one of us stands to lose. Every single one of us stands to lose if this bill passes. So it doesn't matter what banner you're standing under, just stand.
It's been quite ironic that I have gone to protests and had more support for what we were, me and another, our community of home educators was standing up for, from private school parents, school fines parents, SEN parents who use school, than some members of the home education community. Because when I say shoulder to shoulder, absolutely, I'm kind of meaning cross all kinds of parents. But you're right, there is, and I think it comes from different places. And it might be, unfortunately, that this has to be something that's thrown in front of people's faces as a law, and when things start changing, for them to actually wake up and pay attention. And that is really frustrating. And the reasons are, there's going to be a huge amount of fear, and it is easier to put your head in the sand and go, I don't want to think about it. And I know lots, and again, home ed community, a big majority of neurodivergent people who are more likely, are more sensitive to anxiety, stress, and self-preservation means they're just getting their head down. A lot of people, there will be a certain amount of like just hopefulness that it's not going to happen, just kind of like, oh wow, nothing major
It
happened
didn't pass
before.
before the last time.
Yeah, it's always been stopped by someone else, and there's also, I think it's easy for those taking action. It's very easy to go, well, we found the time in our life, why can't they? But actually, like, the landscape now, with the cost of living, with post-COVID, and I know some people still have COVID. Sorry, I've got it. Whenever I say post-COVID, I get loads of messages from people telling me off. There is a lot of reasons why people are very busy, very stressed, not looking up, not coming up for air. And in fact, lots of people just don't have the capacity. They don't have capacity to take on board this. If child's just come out, I mean, goodness, certainly those that have just had children come out of school. I mean, I can't imagine. I don't generally talk to those parents. I mean, I work with lots and lots and lots of home ed parents. I can't imagine somebody talking to me about this massive decision that they're home educating because school was this huge failure and it's hurt their child and all this stuff. And then I go, oh, great idea. By the way, let me just tell you about this bill that's going through Parliament at the moment. It might just totally scupper all your plans. I can't imagine having to have that conversation with families. So there's huge amounts of families that they don't even know it's happening. And in a
Yeah.
way, I think if they did, it wouldn't do them any good. And at the moment, I think those families need to just get on with what they're doing because they've
Yeah.
got enough. So
Yes.
it is, I think the families that maybe are the most, it's the most frustrating is the individuals who, as you say, are finding reasons not to. I think if you've got a reason not to engage, that's all good with me. But when people kind of go, oh, I'm not going to go to that protest simply because I've heard there's somebody from this party or I've seen there's that individual going and I won't align myself with them. That I struggle with a tiny bit more because whilst we are all entitled to our values and our ethics and our thing, and that's everybody's business, some things are just worth putting differences aside for a moment, like for an hour. You
Yeah.
don't have to talk to them, you don't have to swap numbers, you don't have to be best mates, but volume speaks. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, like if I was to go on a protest and expect everybody coming with me to agree with everything I agree with, I'd be pretty lonely because, yeah, we've all got stuff we differ on.
Yeah, well, it's like if you want to stand under if you want to go and have a little protest that's only around your concerns and who you agree with and who you don't agree with, it's going to get pretty lonely out there.
Yeah.
On your corner with your placard. And so I think that we do need to put differences aside. We really do. Our focus is the children's well-being in schools. Well, that is our focus. Get rid of that. It's not any other issue. It's not. I think we've got to, whatever the other issues are, they don't. This is not about that. We're about getting rid of the bill. Louise says you don't have to stand near them, and that's absolutely true. And I think you can be in that protest. Here I am with my banner about my concern, and there you can highlight your concern. I might not agree with your concern. I will still stand next to you. I might be there for a very different reason, but I will still stand next to you and I will still fight for your right to be allowed to home educate in a way that works for you and your child. I will defend that even if it looks very different to mine, because this comes down to the respecting parents and the role of parents in a child's life and the right of a child to have parents that stick up for them and fight for them and want to do what's right for them. And this is what it's about at the end of the day. And that parent, we all know the different issues that we hear about today. We know all of the divisive, polarizing issues. We know them. I'm not going to name them. But as parents, we need to protect one another and that right to choose how we educate our children in a way that works for them, and we protect them from the things that are hurting them. And we need to recognize that and respect that and fight it for everybody else. I know as a home educator, when, as I said, my youngest has now gone to university, I know that I would have been fine if I was very, very fortunate. I did not have local authority engagement in the way most people do. I did work with the local authority, but actually not as I worked to improve relationships with them, and they didn't actually, I never had to provide a report or a response to them. So I was in a very fortunate position. But I know I would have been fine, if there wouldn't have been an issue. But I know for some families that the difference between, in how you represent yourself to the local authorities is very dependent on your local authority and how they read your situation. And so you can be quite vulnerable. And that is why we have to fight this bill, because this bill strips away the protections that you've had up till now as a parent who might be in a vulnerable situation, children that are vulnerable. And so I'm willing to fight to protect you, regardless of how you home educate, regardless of your personal views, as long as they're with not like the ones you should be going to jail for. But I've got to clarify that. But you know what I mean? It's like, I will fight for your right. Michelle will fight for your right. Jenn will fight for your right. We want to see you protected because we know what the implications of this is. I just want to actually say while you're on here is that on the YouTube channel, I've been getting some comments there, and apparently one of our viewers, his kids think we are all YouTube celebrities. So there you go.
I like
Uh,
that. I'll take that.
I'm a
for win.
YouTuber, and you.
Yay.
Okay, so he says our MP is fully supportive of the bill and has promised to support us if the unintended consequences come to pass, and that's really useful because that councillor may be able to help mitigate if the local authority are behaving badly, to have that support.
Oh, and it was something I meant to bring up earlier. Councillors is another one we should be contacting because
Yeah.
there are some of the elections for some of the councillors coming up.
Yeah.
So some pressure coming from below may also help our fight. But also, if the bill does get assent, then gets its regulations and exists, your local councillors have a lot of influence in how your local authority interpret whatever ends up in the guidance. So if they're supportive, keep them on board, encourage others to also start getting the councillors on board as well.
Yeah, and one of the other things so if we're looking to the future and we're looking if this gets a royal assent, Michelle, sorry, I don't know if you're trying to have some me time there, but one of the actions that our community can consider is something like a judicial review, highlighting particularly if the bill is unreasonable, it's not being reasonable and proportionate, and that kind of thing. I mean, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
See, that comes more like when we get the regulations, when we get the guidance and things like that.
Yeah.
Depending how they get worded, if it doesn't match up with what the bill is inferred to be, there are options there. If it's disproportionate, as long as we've still got the human rights, then there are things that can be done. But obviously, it's not an exact science, and it really will come down to the exact wording. And sometimes something on paper that looks disproportionate, when you actually try and challenge it, actually it's not as clear cut as we all think it is, because there's words used like you must, you shoulds, you could, you cans that have different weightings, which when you read something as a lay person, it may not immediately show you what the weight is. So earlier I was saying the problem is with the bill, it says must refuse consent. I'd be a lot more comfortable if it said may refuse consent, because the second there's a may, we're allowing the LA even more discretion. Because at the moment, if your LA's policy is it's the best interests of all children to be in school, well then, although in theory it should be case by case because they're only refusing consent if it's not in their best interests, having that must there, if that ends up being your policy, makes it a lot harder. Having a may there allows for much more discretion on the ground. So there are options later, but it really depends on the exact wording. And I've had people before, then they get fixated and then that wording changes, so the bill may not say what that said earlier. And it's there's lots of balancing then. So it would need to get a proper legal opinion at the point we have the other documents available to do that. It would be too early at this point to categorically say which bits are arguable. There are 4 Casey opinions we've already seen, but even that, in some of the things that were coming up in there are now been amended in some of these amendments. So some bits like the 15 days reporting was disproportionate, and that had been sort of flagged that, you know, that could be a way to consider. Obviously now that's not there and stuff, so it's too early to say really. But yes, there's those options, but it's better to not have to go down them, but they would be available if it is disproportionate.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that we have to take into account, we have to be aware that these bills are not happening in isolation. There are other bills that are being worked on at the same time, like the data use and access bill.
Well, that was quite an interesting one, because I know some of us were saying right early on that the Data Act, when it was a bill, because it's that one started in the House of Lords. I think that one started in the House of Lords because it was like going opposite ways. When that one first came out, a few of us did flag up that would have implications for this bill. And bearing in mind that actually did get royal assent and became an act in the summer, it's only in this most recent amendments this Wednesday it appears anyone noticed that that would have implications for this bill. Although I know if you went on Reclaim Rights for Children's website, you'll see that they noticed it'd have implications back in January. But our own government only appeared to notice literally this week, to then make the amendment that showed that act now adjusts certain bits on the data protection bits because it's amended certain things. So you do have to sort of keep an eye on everything else, because it all meshes together, because humans are messy, lives are messy, and law is a rigid framework to try and set something that people can follow.
Yeah, but because we were saying earlier about I think about if we did a judicial review, a JR, we may find, because of some other law change, another bill, another act or whatever, that actually something that we thought we could, there's murmurings about changing the Human Rights Act, and we might find actually we don't have those rights anymore. Our right to privacy, our right to family life, and then you can't argue that in a judicial review. So we do need to be aware of all these other bills and all the other little things that are happening in Parliament, because Labour have got a very specific agenda, and they're trying to basically make all of these bills to kind of support that and to promote that agenda. So we do need to be aware, because that's going to have bearing. So we were talking earlier about, I was asking, in terms of home educating families, at the moment, the thing that is working well really is our community. So when the bill offers things like that local authorities must provide support, often what they're providing is nothing more than what our own community can offer. Isn't that right, Jen?
Yeah, I don't think that the local authority are offering much at all really for anything, are they? I mean, we're just not seeing it, and the local communities are stepping up and doing filling in the gaps and providing lots of things that people need. But the government, and I think, to be honest, across the board, the local authority, they rely a lot on alternative provisions and community groups and not-for-profits and involuntary voluntary groups to actually meet a huge amount of needs across all sorts of things, across volunteering, resources, support. It's become, I don't know, maybe the government do know, I don't know if they understand quite how reliant the local authority is on people actually meeting needs. One thing I just wanted to say, just going on from the kind of conversation that what Michelle was just saying and what you were saying about kind of different things, is how important it is to actually communicate with your local council and the different services in your local council and local councillors, because and going on from what you said, they don't actually know what's going on. I had a conversation with a number of people at our local authority who really should know some of the implications of this bill. So there's people working in alternative provision, for example, and they had no idea. In fact, I spoke up in a room of 20 people who either ran alternative provisions or were from the local authority in charge of alternative provisions, and none of them had heard of the Children's Wellbeing in Schools bill. None of them knew that they might have the amount of hours they could deliver education as unregistered, as not being a school, could be limited by this bill. They didn't have a Scooby-Doo, and that is insane. That you have people who are over, not only are those alternative provisions thinking, oh, this is great, we have children for like 16, 15, 18 hours a week, la 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 la, let's talk about our other problems. And then when I said, you do realise if this bill comes into effect, you might only be able to have those children for 6 hours a week, they were like, what? And there's been a number of people who work for the local authority, and I asked them to go away and find out about it, and they said we don't know anything. We've not been told anything. There's nothing coming down. So you may, as somebody watching this broadcast, you may probably know a lot more than people that really should know about this stuff, because this bill isn't just about home education, and I know that's what we're talking about today, but it's not just home education, and a way to defeat it isn't just focusing on the one area, but knowing that actually, yes, all of the implications around data security is huge. We've just had millions of people sign a petition to say they don't want digital ID. This is giving children digital ID by the back door. So, you've got that aspect. You've got the limiting access to a non-school based provision, and for any person who is happily sending their child to mainstream because their child accesses alternative provision for 2 days a week, you're going to be impacted potentially if these changes go through as they stand. Kinship carers, anybody involved in kind of looked after children, there's changes there. There's also a lack of support. So a bill that is being sold as like a flagship children's support bill, whatever, it doesn't even do what it says it will do. So as somebody who maybe just has children, is thinking of having children, and thinks that this bill like makes Britain this amazing place to be raising your child or to have your child looked after or your education, it doesn't. And in fact, it leaves massive holes of support that are needed. We know that our fostering services in crisis, looked after children are not, there's nowhere enough support for fostering families. We know that we've got we know that area is actually in crisis right now, and there isn't enough provision, there isn't enough support, and this bill is doing nothing for it. So if you yes, it's great to rally the home educators, yes, you need to do that, but if you want this bill stopped, you need to kind of also think about who you can connect with under the other issues, because if we can put pressure on all angles and all directions and have more people that are standing up against it because they're not happy with this problem or this problem, that's what's going to really help defeat it.
Another thing that's interesting is, with the lack of support that's kind of offered, or let's just say the meaningless support, is that, what is the incentive for parents to engage with their local authority? The incentive is one of fear. The incentive is fear of, being is all these other things that they've mentioned in the bill. So I feel it's really not the way the government should be going. It's like it just doesn't sound very much like they have the interests of the people at heart. I'm not sure. I think they have the interests of the economy at heart.
And I think people get disappointed, because I think lots of people do reach out to the local authority going, I'd like some help here. I've had to make this decision. I'm home educating for whatever reason. And they think that their local authority is going to help with this. And then when they go, yeah, please do come and visit, come and see me. And they just sit there and kind of go, oh, well, it looks like you're doing a good job. And, or oh, well, you're not doing enough of this, or not, whatever way their LA responds, a lot that actually want someone to really connect with and talk to them and explain what's going on and support them, and they're met with either a pat on the head and we'll see you in 12 months, or you're doing something wrong but we're not going to help you fix that, we're just going to give you a school attendance order. There's going to be a lot of disappointment, I think.
I think there's one amendment in this bill. So if we're talking about, how do we find a way forward, there is one amendment that, if it makes it through, I think could be, we're being optimistic here, but it could be a useful one, and that is an amendment where they require local authorities to hold a forum. If one parent wants a forum, they need to hold a forum with home educating parents. I can't remember the frequency, Michelle, you might remember, but that is one way at least that parents can use. That would be, if this bill passes, what can we use to our advantage? Yeah. What can we make good use of and make sure the local authority practice And that would be one of them, because then you would have that opportunity, hopefully, to have a meaningful discussion about what's working and what isn't working.
Yeah, and I think what will happen actually is if we do get to that point, there will be a lot of us working quite hard to produce big lists of ways that you can positively use the bill. It will be looking for every single tiny loophole wording that actually goes in the favour or can be pressed, or actually, you know what, they've put this restriction on you, but they've also put this time frame on them, and if they don't meet this, you can push back, you can demand this, you can. So I think I would hope that at that point we'll have a lot of things that we can use in positive ways to make a difference.
Yeah, well, that's. I think your approach is a very positive one, Jen, and I think I do enjoy that proactive, the voice that you bring to the conversation.